Head over to timcast.com, click join us to become a member and support our show directly. We rely on your membership to make clips like this. Now, back to the show. A CNN panel explodes as ex-Bush advisor claims Kamala Harris couldn't pick Josh Shapiro due to rampant anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party. I don't think it's fair to say the panel exploded. This is Scott Jennings, a former special assistant to President George W. Bush. He made his point, and no one got bent out of shape over it. He made his point. Let me pull it up here. I think it's around the 5-minute mark where he chimes in on this one.
Bowed down to the radical left in her party by not picking Shapiro, who is Jewish. There was a nasty campaign run against him. Everybody knows it. No one wants to admit it, but everybody knows it. Mm-hmm. And she wound up choosing the person who was not Jewish and not as talented and not from the state that she has to win. He did a nice job tonight. Everybody can see why he was the best choice, but she couldn't do it because the party is somewhat awash in anti-Semitism. And for Walz, when he did what he did during the riots, to me, it was him saying, I don't have the strength or the character to stand up to this anarchy. So in two big decision points for this ticket, they've showed us they will always bow down to the radical left. So I think if you want to talk about normal, to the normal people in this country, bowing down to the radical left is not normal. It shouldn't be normal, and it should be a flashing red light.
But this is the reality. And I think he's right. I think the reality is when you look at Cori Bush, they had to dump so much money to compete against her. Now, the reality is people in her district don't like her. The people in Ilhan Omar's district don't like her. The Somali Muslims don't like Ilhan Omar. And this is an important point because a lot of conservatives think that she gets massive support from the Somali community. They roast her all the time because she's a leftist, she's woke, and she's pro-LGBTQ. Right. You can still see with AOC and the squad a large DSA leftist, anti-Israel, pro-Palestine contingent. And the question then becomes, outside of the woke, you do have Dearborn, you do have the Somali migrants in Minnesota. Were they to have picked Shapiro, maybe they could have won in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Maybe they could have won back some of these more moderate Jewish voters in the United States who are concerned and probably going to be voting for Trump. But they probably would have lost a lot in Michigan and Minnesota, I believe it was Michigan, where they had that campaign to not vote for, was it not to vote for Joe Biden?
Yeah. Well, remember, Kamala wasn't running during the primary. Right. She was still the VP.
And I think it's fair to say that there's a difference between criticism of Israel and claiming that they wouldn't vote for a Jewish guy. But I got to stress this, because we had Taylor Hansen on the Culture War podcast, Tenet Media, Friday, 10 a.m. I think this was last week. I have been on the ground, and you have too, Elad. So I want to hear your experiences, but I will tell you mine. I have met many people in the 10 years that I was on the ground who are holding up signs publicly saying, we have no problem with Jewish people. It's just Israel. When the cameras turn off, they're like, no, it's Jews.
So there's so many different groups and types of people, different types of people that you'll see at protests. And some of them are on the same page and some aren't. So at these
fair point. I've met people who are strictly anti-Israel. I have friends who are very critical of Israel. You're allowed to
I'm trying to be very nuanced here. So you'll go to these events and they'll be like young white liberals, the people from the young crowd, like a young black person, a young Spanish person. And I find like some of those people actually tend to be not pro-Hamas, but I'll find them next to more extreme protesters who wrap the keffiyeh around their head, who are usually Arab, who are more likely to yell Allahu Akbar. For example, a couple of weeks ago when Bibi Netanyahu came and visited and gave a speech at Congress, what were the chants that we were seeing when they took the flag down and started burning it? It was the Allahu Akbar. Some of the people disperse at that point. There are only a few flags that have Hezbollah's logo on it. But then again, it's considering like, I remember back in the day when at a Trump rally, if they saw one person with a swastika somewhere outside, they'd say, oh, everybody at the rally is a Nazi. But nobody seems to condemn this stuff actively while they're there. Right. So I'm just trying to have some nuance.
No, I completely agree. So I'll clarify my point. You go to these rallies, you go to these protests, and you'll find people who are like, no, I don't want any hatred towards Jewish people. My friends are Jewish. I'm concerned about Israel. And that's their legitimate position. But there's a lot of people who will on camera say it's Israel because they know what the PR looks like. And then once the camera's off, they'll start talking about Jews starting the slave trade and using banks to control the world and start world wars. We saw this with the Women's March. You had that story from Tablet Magazine. Do you remember this one?
No.
There was a woman who was one of the top organizers, said that the other members of the Women's March sat her down to explain to her how the Jews started the slave trade and started all the world wars and all of these things.
Really?
They won't say it publicly. So and I'll pull that story
You'll find those people. You'll find a small group of those people at all anti-Israel protests, but I don't want to try to tar all of those people as those groups, because if you hate Jews, then you want to show up to the anti-Israel events.
Yeah, but who was screaming Allah Akbar? Was it the Muslims or was it white kids too?
It was people who were wrapped up in keffiyehs, so they try to cover themselves, and in that way you can't really tell, because wearing a keffiyeh isn't a Muslim thing. I think it's like a Palestinian Arab thing. It's where they wrap their head up and are using it to conceal their identity. And a lot of young white liberals, non-Arabs, non-Middle Easterners have appropriated it, and it's kind of just become a Palestinian symbol, but a way to cover yourself too. So
they do realize, like, I don't know if any of them realize this. Look at London right now. You see all the Muslims attacking everybody, raping all the women, stabbing all the kids. Okay. Just because you think you're one of them, you're not. They will cut your head off too. Like,
well, I think it's clear to see who is pro-America and who is anti-American in these protests. If you can dive into all the details if you want, but go on.
I want to ask you a question. Is Farrakhan an anti-Semite?
I believe so. I think his rhetoric is not only anti-Semitic, I'd say he's also anti-white.
I think when he called Jewish people termites or made reference to Jewish people he didn't like as termites, I think it's fair to say he just literally doesn't like Jewish people. So this is a Tablet magazine from 2018. It's not the only article, but they mention the Women's March leadership. Okay, these are Democrats.
Sarsour, yeah.
They wear the pussy hats. They did the Women's March in 2018. Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory, Carmen Perez all proudly declared their friendship and partnership with Farrakhan on various occasions. And this is just one of the stories where it's like, yeah. So I'm just saying this. The idea that Democrats are claiming, so because you mentioned earlier, it was Fetterman who said it, right? Fetterman said that no, the reason everyone's, it's a Republican talking point that Shapiro wasn't chosen because he's Jewish. BS. These are the organizers of the Women's March who are pro-Farrakhan. They would have lost too many votes, and they can't do it. Democrats they won't do it.
Yeah. It's about margins. It's a slim election. You cannot lose. They could have lost 3-4% of the party very easily.
That's right.
Easily. Conservatively, 3-4% of the party.
There's a lot of different strains. We don't need to focus on this too much, but my last tidbit on this is there are many different strains of anti-Semitism, and I think it's important to analyze them and take them for what they are separately. This Louis Farrakhan and Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour adjacent anti-Semitism is from a place of viewing Jews as rich, privileged white landlords. So I just wanted to kind of flesh that out.
Have you seen the memes posted by people of this repute?
Well, they're communists.
They show the privilege pyramid with white people on top, and then above it is a free-floating Jewish group. Like, these are the memes that these people were posting in 2018. They think they were saying things like, "You're not ready for the truth," and it was the white privilege pyramid meme with Jews above it.
Wow.
And then you've got people like this, because I don't know what they posted. I know that people who are following them had been posting these things. I know that there had been a lot of instances where some members of Congress had images from groups they were following were posting things like this and being screenshot. I'm going to say this. By all means, please criticize Israel. You're allowed to do it. Israel is just another country. I don't think the U.S. should be funding any of this stuff. That's just my opinion. That being said, the Democrats do have a large anti-Semitic contingent. Large could be, like you said, 3 to 4%. They're not going to pick Josh Shapiro.
It's much larger than 3-4%. I just think there's only 3-4% that would withhold their vote. I think the anti-Semitic, quote unquote, I don't care. And I'm not big on the Jew thing. I don't care either way, one way or another. But it's at least 25-30% of their party that just literally cannot stand Jews.
You think it's that big?
Yeah,
Wow.
I do. I absolutely do. Who's at all these?
I think the progressives have become like the poison pilled on Jews largely.
But
and
I don't necessarily think it's just the progressives. Muslims as well, more fundamentalist Muslims. I think you make a good point. I don't think all the Somali Muslims in Minnesota are going to be like, oh, we won't vote for a Jewish guy. But I think enough of them.
Yeah.
And that causes problems.
He won 11,000 votes. Trump won these states, some of them 11,000 votes. You can absolutely convince 11,000 of these guys to not vote. And I'm wondering how they're going to vote for a woman, actually, though. That's one of my things.
I wonder about
they
that.
don't respect women.
I mean, I think part of this is that the Democrats have painted it that, they're the open-minded party and they love everybody. And they, it's just occasionally they have to take down white people who have had too much power for too long. And Republicans are the racist ones, when that's just not true, right? Like fundamentally, a lot of racial, religious, ethnic groups in America have tensions with other people of different backgrounds or different, persuasions, let's say, and they have just marketed to convince themselves that they don't. And I think that's why the conflict between Israel and Palestine really shocked a lot of older Democrats, because they thought, oh, no, we're the good guys and we're always on the same side. And the reality is that there are tons of people who have bias against different racial groups. It's in the Democratic Party, just like it's everywhere else in the world.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.